Joining me in studio is Kristin Snell with the Harmony House. Kristin, I know that you guys have been busy over there, so thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Real quick, for people who maybe don't know, the Harmony House is a shelter that focuses on aiding domestic violence survivors. You help women. Do you help men too over there?
Yes, we take men, women, and children who are actively fleeing domestic violence.
Which here in Greene County, there's unfortunately a good amount of it. I think last time, I was a reporter in this market, and the last I heard, it was the number one county per capita in the state for domestic violence rate. Is that still something that's true, or?
I don't think we're number one right now. I don't have the latest statistics in front of me, but we typically fluctuate between first, second, and third with Kansas City and St. Louis.
Okay, so not great, but
Not
we
great.
are the third largest city, so that makes sense. I brought you in today because I want to talk about this Kim Kanye situation, which I think a lot of people think, Kim Kanye, they're pop news. Why would you bring in someone who works with domestic violence survivors? And I think it's because at this point in the media, the conversation where Kanye is at and some of his behaviors has turned a bit concerning. And I know yesterday when I called up Harmony House, Jennifer, who I spoke with, had mentioned, like media outlets are talking about the dangerous, things that we're seeing. So,
Yeah.
We've been seeing Kanye West posting incessantly on Instagram, talking about Kim, his eventual ex-wife. I don't know their kind of divorce status right now, and then deleting them all, and then threats to Kim's person that she is seeing now, and then Kim asking him to stop because she's fearful of behavior from his fans. Kanye bought a house next door. He sent a truckload to roses to Kim on Valentine's Day, stalling the divorce. Kim has publicly said that she has zero interest in rekindling the relationship and has said in a series of texts, according to the Washington Post, that West is creating a dangerous and scary environment. So when you kind of look at what's happening here, whether this be a PR move or a true issue, it has triggered a lot of trauma memories for a lot of people who have dealt with harassment from an ex or perhaps domestic violence situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So seeing that, obviously, Kim and Kanye, they're going to make news every day, and it's going to be front page, headline, just because of their celebrity status. And a lot of what's happening with Kim and Kanye, a lot of people in the community have experienced. And so seeing those things is going to bring back those memories of what they experienced. And then I think another piece of it is the community support that Kanye seems to be getting and the people that are rallying around him. So many times when victims are in relationships, people don't believe them. They will believe the abuser because of all the power and control tactics that they're going to use. And so seeing people rally around Kanye the way they do, I think that's also going to be triggering for them. I
have been reading in articles that fans, primarily men, though not to lay all the blame at men's feet, but primarily men have been rooting Kanye on, saying, fight for your family, bring it back together. Fans see this as entertainment. And, I don't know if this is real or not. I don't know if it's PR.
Right.
It's dangerous either way when I look at some of these things. And I think it normalizes a dangerous narrative that these grandiose gestures of quote unquote love are acceptable. But when you look at all the other details behind them, it's concerning. So what do you kind of see playing out with Kim and Kanye that are red flags that we can directly apply to relationships around us, or like spotting relationships that are just off and potentially dangerous?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this whole situation is riddled with red flags. You mentioned him buying a house across the street from Kim. I think we see that a lot with celebrity couples where they want to co-parent and they buy houses close to each other. But I was reading an article, I think it was a People article, where Kanye made a quote that no security is going to keep him from his children. So obviously that to me is a red flag that he bought the house close to Kim. He says he wants to be able to be close to his children, but I think that's so that he can keep tabs on Kim.
Yeah, a manipulative tactic.
Yeah, because as we know in domestic violence, once the victim leaves that relationship, that's when it can become the most dangerous, especially within those first 72 hours, which obviously we've moved past that with Kim and Kanye. But with them not being in a shared home anymore, and she obviously has moved on with her life, as we see, he has lost that control over her. And so he's going to do things like buy a house close to her, making their conversations public.
Yeah, I know Kim was like, why are you putting all of this out there? And it's like, it's almost as if when I see that, he's looking for people to affirm his behavior, which he's getting. And it's like, guys, like we're just seeing obviously a surface layer of what's going on here. And I feel like for general population outside of celebrity status and the money and the security, we also only see the surface layer of a relationship and we don't know the depths of it. So these are like surface layer red flags. Who knows what else is going on and has been going on behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with him sharing the messages, in my opinion, and working with domestic violence victims, that is his way to minimize what is happening and to also shift the focus to him as the victim. I also read somewhere that he had posted an Instagram picture of a billboard that said something to the effect of women shouldn't make it so hard for men to have to fight for their kids or something to that effect.
I saw that on Instagram. I'll have you come just a little closer to you, Mike.
Yeah.
I saw that he had posted that on Instagram, and it's like, oh, gosh, my heart just kind of cracked.
Yeah.
In seeing that.
Yeah, so that's his way of painting Kim as the villain and he as the victim.
Yeah, and I want to reference, I was reading about, and then I looked into a report that came from 1995 from the DOJ on violence against women. So keep in mind, this is 27 years old, it's older. But still those numbers were staggering, and perhaps you can speak to that. It said women who separated from their husbands are 3 times more likely to be assaulted. Divorced women, that number goes to 25 times more likely. Women are 6 times more likely to experience violence from their partner as opposed to men. And they're more likely to experience violence from a partner as a woman than to be victimized by a stranger.
Yeah.
Domestic violence impacts 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men. So still a lot of men, but primarily women. Do you see those statistics kind of happen here in Greene County, in Missouri? What can people watch for? I know I asked 2 questions there within one.
Yeah, so I would say those stats are pretty reflective of what we experience here in Springfield and Greene County. Just looking at our own shelter census, we typically do see more women than men. What was your second question?
The second question, that's a great question. I was so focused on what you were saying. It was the second question. You know, so stats, so like what can people look for? Like what are red flags perhaps if somebody is, gosh, just this whole thing is riddled with red flags.
Yeah.
You know, I once took a crime justice and gender class in college. As you know, you have to take a certain set of, and I found it wildly fascinating. And in that, the scary statistic came out, and this still stands out in my mind, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, but I remember the professor saying that a woman is most likely to be killed by her abuser within the first 2 years of leaving him. And people don't understand that women leave an average of 7 to 9 times before they stay permanently gone from their abuser. So perhaps you could speak to this notion of, well, why don't you just leave him? Why do you keep going back? Because there is an emotional, a psychological attachment applied to this. So maybe you could speak kind of to that. Because when I see that statement from people, I think, ooh, gosh, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a myriad of issues that can keep someone with their abusive partner. Most likely the relationship didn't start out abusive. It started out with love. And then it grow abusive over time. Anytime you have children involved, that's always going to complicate the issue because that involves going to court, more time, co-parenting or splitting custody. Abusers will use the children to manipulate the victim.
Do you think we're seeing that with Kim and Kanye right now? Because I see him often, or have seen him in the past, saying, you know, I don't like that you did this with our kids. You know, the kids were in vogue, or I don't like that you started the kid at a TikTok, you know, stuff like that. Right. And does it not in a private fashion, but to where we can all see it type thing. Do you see that as kind of a manipulative tactic on his part?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, he obviously has the right to have valid concerns about Kim and her parenting and what she does with the children when she has them. But I think in this particular instance, he is, again, using that to manipulate and paint Kim as the bad person. And he is painting himself as the doting father who cares about the kids. Again,
it's hard to speculate about celebrity relationships because we just see the surface level. But what we are seeing, to me, as someone who has reported extensively on domestic violence, in particular domestic violence in Southwest Missouri, to me it popped up we got to talk about this because this is a bigger issue than just us being entertained as an audience,
right?
Type thing. What are ways that people can support domestic violence survivors? Because it's more common than people think, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I think here in the Bible Belt, it's easiest for us to say, oh, it's not happening, or look the other way, or even through religious practices, we say, well, you got to forgive him and move on, and I think to some extent that's dangerous, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's only so much forgiveness you can offer someone, I'm not God type thing. So what are ways that people can support domestic violence survivors, whether that be through Harmony House or on a personal level?
Yeah. So anybody if they know someone who is experiencing domestic violence, the first thing that you can do and the best thing you can do for them is just believe them, because chances are they've been in this relationship for a while and they may have never reached out for help before, or they may have tried to share their story in the past and no one believed them because of whatever manipulation tactics that the abusive partner was using. So believing someone and just listening, sometimes that can lift a weight off of someone's shoulders. We experience that when people come into shelter. Sometimes they just need to sit and they need to talk. Validating their feelings, that's super important. And then giving them the choice. Chances are in their relationship, their autonomy has been taken away. So making sure that they have a choice whether or not they disclose just to you, or if you want to mention a resource like Harmony House and reaching out to our hotline, making sure that they understand that that's their choice and that you're not trying to force them to do something.
Can you talk about the removal of autonomy? What do you mean by that?
So in a relationship, abusive relationship, chances are the victim has had to cater to the abusive partner and had to abide by whatever rules they have set. Sometimes we see that as the abusive partner will say, no, you can't wear makeup, or no, you can't go here, you can't do that. And so the abusive partner literally has all control over their life. And so the victim doesn't feel like they have the right to make their own choices.
Can you kind of talk about, do you find that people who've been in these situations kind of hide it?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and the reasoning behind that you have found with Harmony House?
I think this Kim and Kanye situation is a really great example of what might cause someone to keep to prevent someone from disclosing, because they see the reaction of the community and the support on behalf of Kanye and not so much on Kim. They may say, well, if they're not going to believe her, they're not going to believe me. And sometimes they just have been so overwhelmed with the relationship that they don't even really fully understand what they're experiencing. And generational trauma also plays into that. If they experienced abuse as a child, grew up in an abusive household, they may not know anything different, so that may be their norm. So again, they may not even recognize what's happening. And we have had survivors come into our shelter, how we have talked to them through like their experiences and what has happened to them, and they just continually get these little light bulb moments of, I didn't even realize that what I was experiencing was abuse.
They don't realize it in the moment, and then something just clicks for them. Have you found like resources like social media, like in particular TikTok, which has this wildly specific algorithm, has helped more people or hurt more people type thing? Or can you even talk about something like that?
Yeah, in my own personal experience using TikTok, I have seen what I feel like is a lot more victims come forward and share their story. But with the specifics of the algorithm, I don't know that everybody's going to see that. And then there are also kind of the other side of TikTok where things are wildly inappropriate and people are sharing very harmful things.
Yeah, TikTok's a wild place to be. Yeah. That's for sure. Can you kind of talk about some of the causes that lead to domestic violence? Like, I know from my own reporting and own research as my time as a journalist, poverty was a big thing. Not seeking out proper mental health was a big thing. Not having the ability to properly communicate emotions. Generationally, this is what happened in my family, so this is what I think is a normal behavior. Can you kind of talk to each of those items that might be within an abuser or might be within an abusive relationship?
Yeah. So again, speaking to that generational trauma, if that is something that someone grew up with and they haven't known any different, they're going to think that's the norm, and they're going to think that's how all relationships should look like. So that's how they're going to behave.
How is that broken? How is that generational trauma broken? Because that seems like a high hurdle if that's all you've known.
Really seeking out mental health resources, and especially therapy or counseling, that's really going to be the key to really getting down to those root issues of what is causing that person to behave in that way. I really think that's key in breaking that cycle.
Are there resources here within Southwest Missouri that can cater to mental health for people who are on the low income side of things? Because if we know poverty is also a contributing factor, perhaps lack of mental health care access is also a factor in preventing it. So are there resources available where people can see a mental health professional when they don't have a lot of money?
Yeah, so places like Burrell and Jordan Valley, they offer mental health services. They offer a sliding scale if someone has Medicaid. And I know the Victim Center has trauma counseling, trauma therapists. We have NAMI here in town. So there's quite a few resources where someone could reach out for mental health.
Can you tell me kind of the residual effects of someone who is on the receiving end of the abuse once they have the opportunity to leave it? And I mean, what does healing look like for them? Like, what can you expect as someone fresh out? Because I'm sure some of their behavior might seem not rational to a lot of people, but then if you hear their backstory, it kind of all makes sense.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember about trauma is that it's not going to be a quick process. They're not going to leave that relationship and either enter shelter or go into some safe place to stay and be better. I think a lot of people think that once they leave the relationship that everything's going to be fine. It's going to take time. And the thing with trauma responses, like you mentioned, people are going to act in a way that someone else who has not experienced those things is going to seem irrational, or someone may be hypervigilant, or they might, what we feel like, overreact to something very small. But when you have been sort of confined into an abusive relationship where your mental state and your emotions have all been manipulated by someone, it can be really hard to figure out how to regulate those.
And I want to specify, maybe add a little asterisk here. When we talk about domestic violence, it's not always he punched me in the face.
Right.
What are other forms of abuse?
Yeah. So, like you said, I think when most people hear domestic violence, they think of the physical aspect. There is the emotional abuse, which is like belittling, name calling. There's the psychological abuse, which is gaslighting. There's financial abuse. So that can look like an abuser tampering with a vehicle so the victim can't leave. When the victim goes to work, they have to turn their paychecks into the abusive partner. The abusive partner empties out the bank account. There's isolation. So the abusive partner is going to isolate the victim from their family and their friends so that the abusive partner is the only person that they can turn to.
What are ways that they isolate? Because it sounds, I think for the normal person, you think, well, how are you going to isolate me from my family? Like, what, so what are tactics that they use to do that? And how does that start?
So a lot of times what that looks like is the abusive partner will start to spread false information or false rumors about the victim to damage their character so that people aren't going to want to associate with him and they're not going to want a relationship with him. Other times it can happen slowly over time of if the victim is wanting to go see their family, the abuser may come up with whatever list of reasons why that can't happen. And then slowly over time, as that continues to happen, the victim no longer feels like they can try to reach out to anybody else because they just have the abusive partner and whatever tactics that they're trying to use.
You mentioned the term gaslighting, and I see that a lot on social media, and I also think it gets applied to situations that are not gaslighting, which then takes the word and waters it down, which is, I don't know, it seems a little dangerous. So just set the record straight. What is gaslighting so people know? So
gaslighting in its very broad sense is when the abusive partner basically is going to make the victim feel like they're crazy. So it may be that the abusive partner takes the victim's cell phone and moves it to a different location. And then when the victim expresses that they can't find their phone or they don't remember putting it there, the abusive partner is like, no, you always keep your phone there. And so it's those little things like that start to cause the victim to doubt themselves, and then they're unsure of really kind of what to believe.
It's not just we disagree, he's gaslighting me. It's there are actions.
Yeah, it's
playing out.
it's an actual like mental manipulation to where the victim feels like they can't even trust themselves because they doubt everything that they do because the abusive partner is playing those mind games on them.
And I also see the term narcissist thrown around really aggressively online. Are you familiar with that term, and could you detail it and then maybe see how it applies to domestic violence situations? Because I go to therapy, right? And I've asked her about that just out of pure curiosity. And she said, well, there's a spectrum and it's rare that someone's a full-on narcissist. Yeah. So I think that's another term that gets applied out of context. Do you guys see that, or have you seen that more?
Yeah, I feel like, and this is kind of my general assumption, is that I feel like we hear the word narcissist more than we're actually seeing it. Because I don't think people fully understand what that word means, and they just kind of throw it around.
Yeah, that's kind of the general idea that I get too. Do you think that more people know a domestic violence situation, offender, I don't want to say victim, but survivor, than what they actually realize?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And what do you think people should do about it?
I think the most important thing that we can do is we can have conversations about domestic violence. It's not a fun conversation to have, and it's really uncomfortable, but the more we talk about it, the more people are going to understand it. They're going to understand the dynamics, and they're going to know how to help someone. So the first thing is just to talk about it, get educated, reach out to organizations, attend workshops, presentations, whatever is being offered, so that when someone does disclose to you, or if you get a feeling of like something's not quite right in this relationship that I'm observing, whether it's a friend or family member, you'll know what to do and you'll know where to go.
What kind of help is there for the abuser? And I know that's kind of a weird question because obviously there's a sympathy for people who survive this, but we don't want them to go back out and continue to reoffend, if that can be a term. So like, how do you turn somebody around from this to where it doesn't continue to happen, or is there a saving grace?
Yeah. So unfortunately, abusive partners really aren't going to, for the most part, try to help themselves and reach out for help. A lot of time what that looks like is court ordered. So there are like batterer intervention programs, but I don't know the success rate on those. But if something is court ordered, chances are it's not going to be as effective if someone's reaching out for something on their own.
So do you see a lot of I don't know if that's the right word, reoffenders, people who go back and they do that to their next partner and it's just kind of a continual cycle, or do you see people break the cycle?
Since we don't really deal a lot with the abusive partner, I'm just going off general assumptions, and what I know and working in the field is that chances are they're just going to go on to reoffend unless there's some sort of accountability, whether it's something that's court ordered or incarceration.
Okay, so not great.
Yeah.
Not great news.
Right.
Did we touch on 7 to 9 times women leave before they actually stay away? Okay. I wanted to make sure that we kind of touched on that. Because I think it's so easy when you read the numbers and you think, oh, gosh, I would never.
Right.
But until you're in that situation, you don't know what you're going to do.
Right. And it's not as easy as like picking up your purse and your keys and walking out the door. Like, it's not that simple. There are so many different things that can complicate someone leaving.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. And then when kids are involved, you're always worried if my partner has them or my former partner has them, like, is he or she going to hurt them in order to get back at me? Do you guys see that at all, where the abuse gets applied to the children? You do. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah. So the abusive partner can do a multitude of things with children, whether they're harming the children, them actually like physically or mentally harming the children. The abusive partner may use the children to spy on the other partner. So
that just sounds like years of therapy that's going to have to happen for kids in the future.
Yeah. So kids go back to that abusive partner after being with the other parent, the non-offending parent. And then the abusive partner is like, hey, what is mom or dad doing? Like, who are they hanging out with? What are they doing? And so they're manipulating the children to also manipulate the survivor.
Okay. Not good all around. Yeah, I think the head games that get played in this, like, when your arm's cut off, people can see the pain. They can see
absolutely
it's blatant. But when it's in your head or it's been happening to your brain, it's a totally different story. And I think that's difficult for people to see and understand or attempt to understand. And I also think as a society, we're just now coming to terms with this idea of talking about mental health, that mental health is like a thing.
Yeah.
And so your mental health is going to be impacted by this no matter which way you go. Circling back to the Kim and Kanye thing, because I know that's kind of what has prompted this entire thing. Are you seeing a lot of conversations play out online where people are saying, whoa, we got to talk about this because this isn't just some lover's quarrel or a spat. This is something bigger.
From the comments and things that I've seen online, from my perspective of what I've seen, the only people I see raising alarm to this are people that have experienced this.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about when you see these guys online saying, yeah, go get it, get your girl type thing? I mean, it just seems like I was reading one article that said, romantic comedies has made this a thing. If she says no, go get a boombox, hold it above your head type thing. We've romanticized these larger than life gifts, I guess you could say. Can you kind of talk about yeah, that sounds great in theory, but it's scary when you're harassing someone like the way you are.
Yeah, like speaking about the Kim and Kanye situation where he delivered that truck full of roses to her. Mm-hmm. That might sound like a really sweet romantic gesture, but then when you look at it combined with everything else that we're seeing, that's when it's time to raise the alarm and be concerned about what you're seeing because it's not that romantic gesture.
Yeah, I often think okay, what if they weren't celebrities and this was just Mary Jane and Joe and there was no security around, what would happen?
Yeah, it's very concerning, especially as we have kind of normalized this through movies and TV shows and whatnot. People are going to think that that's acceptable and they're seeing the support that Kanye is getting. So again, they're going to think that that's okay to do. And it's dangerous all around, but it may be dangerous for someone, like you said, who doesn't have security or a security system or a security presence. Because we see a lot of, once the survivor has left the relationship, we see a lot of stalking and harassment, which we're sort of seeing with Kim and Kanye also. So the danger factor is just going to continue to increase.
Okay. Is there anything else you think that our audience should know about domestic violence here in the area?
I think the most important thing to remember is that it's out there and that we need to talk about it. And if you yourself are struggling or you know someone who is or currently in an abusive relationship, we have a 24-hour hotline. It's 417-864-SAFE. That is a hotline that is answered 24/7, 365. We have advocates that take those hotline calls and we can assess people for shelter. If someone is not quite ready to move into shelter or they're still sort of unsure about leaving, we can help them with safety planning and we can help them connect to other resources in the community.
Yeah, because I have read before that, if it's a dangerous situation, you have to make a plan to exit.
Yeah.
Type thing. Can you walk us through that and what that looks like?
Yeah. So safety planning may look like setting up a safe word with a family member or a friend. If you know, because the survivor is going to know their relationship best and they're going to know the best way to keep themselves safe. So it may be at a certain time you set up a word with a friend and you text the word apple to your friend. Mm. That friend is going to know that they can come by and pick you up, or you may have to flee out of a window. So it may be plotting your exit points of your house, gathering your personal documents. If you have a small amount of cash or debit card or credit card or something, if you can stash those away somewhere safely, pack a small bag of clothes. Or sometimes it's just planning to stay safe in that relationship because, like we've talked about, once you leave that relationship, there's a really significant chance that abuse or the violence is going to escalate. So it may be figuring out how to stay safe in the home.
Right. And just because there's the chance,
yeah,
girl, it's not going to get better type thing, as you've discussed.
Yeah.
Okay. Kristin Snell with the Harmony House here in Springfield, Missouri. Thank you for making time for us to talk about this big topic.
Yeah,
it really
thank
is a
you
big
for
topic.
having me.
Yeah.